Patricia Noelle to the show. I am super honored to have you on and discuss what you do, where you got from where you are right now, what you're doing, and everything. So I'm so welcoming you here to the show.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here, and I'm excited for a very heartfelt conversation.
Thank you. Me too. So let's jump right back in. And what I would love to know is about your journey and what led you to become a spiritual teacher and a psychedelic guide.
Mm.
How did you get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the universe works in mysterious ways, as I say, right?
Mm.
And in 2017, I tragically lost my sister Jennifer to a fentanyl overdose. And there was a confluence of events in my life that were really challenging. I was having a lot of childhood flashbacks of childhood abuse at that time. And I found myself literally on the floor of my bedroom pleading with God, who I had kind of divorced myself from after leaving the Mormon religion when I was 16, and just asking for a path to healing because I had done talk therapy. I had explored so many different modalities and I felt so lost at the time. And truly, it was a divine intervention that
Mm.
I started looking online and came across Iboga. And my first therapeutic experience with psychedelics was a month later in the jungle using Iboga as a healing tool to really unlock a tremendous amount of childhood trauma that I had completely disassociated from.
Mm.
And really, I would say my healing journey began at that time and ended up taking the deep dive into healing psychedelics, going back to school and studying spiritual psychology. I studied under Gabor Mate and his program, Compassionate Inquiry, and now find myself leading others on their healing journeys as well.
Mm. So can you elaborate? Because I have a couple friends who are in, I guess these religious domains, I guess you could call it, are more of a um, dogmas kind of thing. How was for you to escape that?
Gosh,
Was
it's
it
such.
difficult for you? Because at 16, I think that's a very, very sensitive time for us.
Mhm.
Like I know because I have a 17-year-old, and I know it would have been absolutely terrifying for her to, if she was in any of these kind of sects of kind of religious things. So I cannot imagine what you went through. So can you dive into that little bit of how hard it was for you to move on to the next, or freeing yourself from that?
Mhm. Well, when I was 16, I became pregnant
Mm-hmm.
and I was absolutely panicked of what might happen with my family. I mean, the shame that would be brought on, of course, premarital sex in the Mormon faith is a sin. And I wanted to go have an abortion because I didn't know how to handle it. I mean, I was terrified with my family of what the consequences might be, not only with my family, but my faith. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, my belief in God as I knew it. And so I had told one childhood friend, a dear friend, that I was pregnant, and she called my parents and told them. And they shipped me, they came and picked me up and took me to the bishop's house of the church. And he essentially put his hand on my knee and just said, of the consequences with God and our faith as we knew it, of what this meant to actually have premarital sex. And at that time, they shipped me to an all girls school in Provo, Utah. We were living in California at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And here in this all girls school, I went from being, a violinist and pianist and active in tennis in my high school to overnight believing that I had no value. And I had begged and pleaded my parents to come back home to give birth to my son. Finally, they acquiesced. When my son was 9 months old, the bishop of the church again wanted to see me and shared with me that he had a vision from God, that God had shared with him that this child was no longer meant to be with me, and my son was adopted out at 9 months old. And so after that experience, something in my soul, the discord of that felt so wrong. I couldn't identify exactly what it was at the time, but I knew intuitively that I wasn't having these premonitions.
Mhm.
These weren't my truths. It was something outside of myself. And it really began this lifelong quest of healing and trying to understand myself better.
Mm. That is so profound because I find a lot of people are stuck in that moment of not knowing how to get to the next level of, healing. Like you mentioned, you did some courses with Gabor Mate, and I love his teachings, by the way, because we all carry these traumas that we
Mm-hmm.
have from our past. We all have it. I have it. You have it. Everybody has it. It's just how we navigate through these
Mm.
rivers um, to get where we are today. For me, it took me almost 50 years to get where I am.
Yeah.
And it's a still never ending process. I'm still dealing with some stuff that I have to face
Mm.
myself. Um, are they challenging? Absolutely, they're challenging.
Yeah, I
But
think that's something, I just want to touch on that briefly. I think that's such a misconception that we have, and certainly a belief that I carried that I would get to this point in my career or my life, and all of a sudden the challenges would kind of
disappear.
disappear. And
Mhm. Yeah,
it's not that they get easier, it's just how we navigate through them does, and
right.
how we can carry such self awareness and self compassion as we move through some of these experiences.
And
Um,
forgiveness. That's a big
and
one.
forgiveness. Yeah. I would
Mhm.
love to hear from you. I'm so grateful that you brought up forgiveness. What is your belief around forgiveness and childhood trauma?
Hmm. So for me, I'm an immigrant, a child of immigrant parents. So I originally come from Poland.
Mm,
And during 1980s, or 88, we left. But Poland was a communist country, and my dad left. We left the country in 88 as a tourist, and we went on a vacation to Greece. Well, my parents never told me, ever told me. So I was super excited because we were on the vacation. We never been to Greece. And after 3 months, I was kind of, as a 12-year-old child, I kept on asking myself, I'm like, why am I not coming back home? Like, what's going on? And my parents just didn't know because, again, they come from a different background, right? They were born in 1950s, right 5 years after World War II. So their upbringing were completely different than mine. And then now my sister and so on. So they just didn't know how to deal with this. And at one point, my mom was, I wouldn't say upset, but she was kind of at the point where she's like, well, we're never going back. And it shocked me. I personally did not know how to react to it. Like, I went into that mode of protection, hatred, um, just blocking everything that was coming my way. I was crying. I got super sick, emotionally super sick, that I have left everything behind and I was not going back home. And we didn't know, or I didn't know where we were going, because at that time we were in the point where the borders have, so Poland became free country in 1998. And we couldn't go back to, well, we couldn't go to the United States. We couldn't go to Canada. We would have to go back to Poland. And my dad is refusing to go back to Poland. He goes, we can't go back after 2 years. We can't go back. What are we going, the shame.
Mm-hmm.
The, what would our neighbors think? We were gone for 2 years and now we're coming back. So there was a lot of things on my parents' plate as well, and I totally understand it. But as a 12-year-old, I was in the world of, oh my goodness, what's going on? And
Mm.
then I came to Canada when I was 15, and middle of winter, very, very depressed. I struggled with that for quite some time. I don't think I ever shared that with anybody. So coming on
Mm.
the show, actually sharing this is quite nerve-wracking right now. I'm a little bit nervous, but
Mm.
um, very depressing, very, very depressing. And when I turned 17, I said to my parents, because we lived in a very small town in Prince Edward Island, Canada, probably maybe about 300 people or so. And I said to them, I turned 17, and I'm like, I need to get out of here. I can't be here. And of course, my parents would do anything and everything to hold me back. And I was just like, I can't be here. I need to figure this out on my own. And, I'm kind of semi adult now and whatever. Anyways, the point is that we finally moved to Ottawa, Canada. And I still had that resentment from my parents. Everything they would say, I would do the opposite. And I came to the realization of forgiveness from my parents because there was a lot of friction going on between my parents.
Mm.
And probably when I was about 35, I had to come to that conclusion that I can't live in this, not fear, but this resentment that I had towards them without even consciously knowing that I was doing that to them, you
Sure.
know? And then at around 35, maybe 36, I said to myself, why am I punishing myself and why am I punishing them? Why am I doing this? So then I went through my own personal uh, journey. And then my husband and I have separated for about 7 years.
Mm.
And that's where I was in a search for something.
Mm.
And there's a lot of things that was happening in our marriage that drove us apart. And something clicked where I started to searching and I started to look for other things in my life that I needed to heal because I was finding these patterns within myself, this blockages, I could call it, where I needed to break those bricks. Because I think since about age of 12, since my parents told me that we're not coming back, I have built these massive walls and I couldn't break through them.
Mm.
And my marriage was going through difficult time and these walls weren't coming down. So
Mm.
when we did separate it and I finally went through that realization that like it's not him, it's me. I need to take those walls down and I need to look in within myself what was holding me back. And when I realized that it was my anger and it
Mm.
was my resistance of what happened, I had to let go of that. But forgiving myself was the hardest part,
Mm.
because I had to come to, it's not your fault. They had to do what they had to do at that moment. They had no choice at that
Yeah.
particular time back home. So I had to approach this as I am living in a great place, you know, I am free. I have everything I want.
Mm.
How do I forgive myself? And
Mm.
that work brought me into spiritual, again, looking into spiritual aspect of everything. And I forgave myself. I forgive my husband. I forgive my parents. Um, Although my husband and I have been together back in the last 2 years, uh,
Mm.
it's been fantastic. There's still work in progress. We're still working on certain things. I'm working on myself. It's a never ending journey. That's all I will say.
Ah, thank you so much for sharing from this place. And I understand the vulnerability
Yeah.
apprehension. This is such a juicy conversation for me right now and
Absolutely.
topic right now around forgiveness and anger.
Mhm.
And I just want to say, I can only imagine the deep betrayal that that
Mhm.
felt like with your parents as well, right? And then the walls we construct around that to protect ourselves from feeling that level of pain and displacement
Absolutely.
as a child. And then, I think too with depression, I too, when I was younger, struggled a lot with depression and couldn't really identify where it was coming from. But when we aren't taught how to really process
Deal with the emotions.
emotions,
Yes.
right? We repress it and then it shows up as depression and repressed emotion as
Right.
I've come to understand it. Um, it's interesting because I have a childhood of physical and sexual abuse in addition to
Mm.
the loss of my son and that connection. And I'm in a deep, deep inquiry right now of moving through anger and resentment and
Mm.
really sitting with these intense emotions. I don't want to detour, but I've been recovering for the last 2 years from a really severe traumatic brain injury by
Mm.
trusted practitioners and friends. And, it was as if joy and pleasure in my brain got turned off and anger
Mm.
and rage got turned on for 2 straight years.
Mhm.
And I've really been in this free fall of surrender of show me how to work with these intense emotions.
Mhm.
And, I full and wholeheartedly believe that, holding on to it is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, as they say, right?
Right.
And I think something that you also touched on that's so profound, and it's a piece that so many miss on their journey, is that it's not even so much about forgiving those that have abused us. It's about forgiving ourselves for the way we behaved as a byproduct of what we've
Mhm.
lived through. And,
Because we don't know better.
we don't know better and we don't know
No.
how. And I think one of the big missions that I've been on in my healing journey is how do
Mhm.
we dispel perpetrator and victim? How do we
Mm.
stop with that role of these two components? Because hurt people, right?
Right.
And so, how do we hold compassion for our perpetrators and also hold them accountable and responsible, but not hold on to the anger? And it's something that I'm still working through as it relates
Mhm.
to sexual abuse. There's a lot of people in the industry that it's unforgivable. Some of the our spiritual teachers out there, it's unforgivable. You move on, you live your best life. And I've really been teasing out what does forgiveness around this really mean to me?
Mm.
And I just appreciate you sharing that because it is such an important role. And then we project it into all of our relationships, right? As you said with your husband, you had to take
Absolutely.
accountability for your own experience of that. And we don't heal until we do our own work.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So we have 3 children, and I think my focus right now on them is guiding them through this because they went through a really hard time themselves
Mm.
through the process of separation. And I know for a fact that they're holding this anger, frustration because as young children they didn't know better.
Right.
So guiding them in the last year, both of us, we explained to them
Mm.
exactly, talking about forgiveness, that it's not their fault, that they're still loved and everything. Is just learning how to forgive themselves
Mm.
for whatever, because they have these thoughts. We all have thoughts in our heads,
Hmm.
but it's just how do you let go of these thoughts,
Mm.
right? So, I mean, we've been together back for about 2.5 years, and the kids, like the first year was really tough, but
Mm.
going through this whole, again, spiritual um, development or healing, forgiveness, and everything, it brought us to the point where, I think our family, our core values, and everything came together so beautifully. The kids are super happy. we always talk about it at dinner table. If there is anything that they need to be talked about, it's really, really wonderful. I'm so happy. Couldn't be happier. But yeah, it's we always tell them, never stop.
Yeah.
It starts with them, and you always have to show them the example of, you will make mistakes. You
Yeah.
you will, but it's like, how do you look at that, and how do you, I don't want to say fix it, but how do you sit with it, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm. One of the exercises that I love so much with my friends and family
Mm.
members is the simple ask of give me three emotions, inviting people to tap into what they're experiencing in the present moment.
Mhm.
And I think often we get so busy with life and consume that people don't really take the time to
Yeah.
truly drop into what's present for me, what's coming up, and how, and as we know, the majority of our experience is through the filter of our childhood.
Right.
And so the more that we can have that awareness and then tether it back to the childhood wounding and give, I love the expression, healing is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt, right?
Mm.
And most of that is circling back to a childhood experience that we haven't fully alchemized or transmuted, right?
Right.
Um, and I know for me, the experience with my son, I was no longer, I tried to get pregnant again in my adult
Mhm.
life. I was no longer able to conceive. It ended up in having a full hysterectomy and my ovaries removed through some complications, probably stemming back to his birth. And, it's just so much of that I think I still sit with. I think the loss of a child in that way, I don't know
Mhm.
that you ever fully heal that part of
Mhm.
yourself. You learn to sit with it
Mhm.
differently, but I know that I struggle with a lot of fear around loss and love,
Right.
and it's an ongoing process of being able to drop into um, compassion for myself and what I've lived through and the trauma that I've endured, right? And
Right.
I don't know that it ever fully goes away, but we definitely get the muscle gets stronger that we exercise in doing the work and self reflection and healing. I have a question
Yeah.
for you. Did you experiment with psychedelics at all through your healing journey?
No, I have not. I've looked into it actually, and I'm curious about it.
Mm.
But if you can share anything about it, I would be more than happy to hear what you have to
Yeah.
say.
You know, I truly believe wholeheartedly that psychedelics saved my life.
Hmm.
My son came back to live with me when he turned 18, and all of a sudden it cracked open a well of repressed memories that I
Hmm.
was not equipped to deal with. And I thought that I was going crazy. We often don't talk a lot about disassociation and flashbacks of
Hmm.
childhood memories. And for me, it was so overwhelming that I really thought that I was going crazy. And I knew that traditional modalities that I had explored historically just weren't working.
It was like
And
putting a band-aid on, I assume.
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think too, in talk therapy, there's aspects of it that can be enormously helpful, but also going and regurgitating the story over and over again kind of
Hmm.
etches in those neural pathways of
Right.
ingraining those traumatic experiences. And so for me, being able to go back and working with MDMA as well, going back and having so much compassion for myself and also compassion for those that were involved in my abuse as a child and unpacking those memories in such a
Hmm.
safe container, it undoubtedly saved my life because I had all the symptoms of sexual physical abuse, but I didn't have the memories. So I was acting out behaviors without really being able to get to the root of what was
Mm-hmm.
wrong or what had happened. And so psychedelics for me, it's like the way that I kind of look at it, it's as if you're living in a room your entire life, and then psychedelics pull these blackout curtains open, and all of a sudden you can see things
Mm-hmm.
so clearly and all possibilities. I lost my sister Jennifer in 2017 to a fentanyl overdose, as I said, and then I
Mm-hmm.
lost my sister Jacqueline to suicide
Oh, I'm sorry.
the year before last. And thank you so much. And it's something, I live in Utah. Utah has the highest rate of youth suicide in the country, a high rate of suicide generally. The one of the highest in mental illness in the country, and also opioid addiction. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we look at that, it's like, what is happening where we aren't really talking about
Mm-hmm.
um, these traumas in a way that can be meaningful so we can get to the root and really have radical healing. And I think it's systemic as well. And I also believe that until we bring these traumas into the light and really, and I love what you said about it wasn't until I really looked at myself
Mm-hmm.
that the healing started to happen. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that psychedelics allowed me to do an internal process of self inquiry and really get real and honest with what
Mm-hmm.
happened in my life and the ways that I was showing up in relationships, all relationships in my life.
Right, because you get to the point where you're like, well, it's not me, I'm fine. And
Mhm.
you just shove things under the rug without even looking at it. And I think a lot of people live this way. And I know I can admit it that I live this way
Mhm.
because I never wanted to talk about these things. So what I
Yeah.
would do is I would always agree, or I would say, "Oh no, it's okay." But
Mhm.
inside, I know it was like literally eating me alive. And I
Mhm.
just didn't know how to express it. I didn't know how to bring it up,
Mhm.
to the attention of others, even my parents or my mom or my dad, or even my husband. So um, learning to speak up and
Mhm.
really deal with these moments of anxieties and whatever, and taking everything out that was under that carpet or
Yeah.
rug is it was painful at
Mhm.
some point.
Yeah.
So that brings me back again the point to psychedelic. How did you find out about them? Because I've heard it too through other people in my groups, and they were all saying that it helped them in certain situation. But how did you how did you found out about it?
Yeah, and when I found out about it, it was truly just from Googling online.
Okay,
And that's how I found out about therapeutic
you were in
use
the
of
search for
psychedelics.
something for sure.
Yeah. And so I found out about Iboga initially about how it was so beneficial for PTSD. Now,
Hmm.
mind you, when I first started my psychedelic journey, psychedelics had not hit mainstream like they are now. I mean,
Hmm.
now it's an open conversation
Yeah.
um, and has a lot of public attention. And it definitely, I had kind of found it before this whole psychedelic renaissance. And so when I found Iboga online, it was just such a sacred yes for me. And I often tell people when they ask me, well, what psychedelics should I use? Where should I start? I always firmly believe that when the teacher is ready, the student appears.
Yes.
And for me, that teacher was Iboga. And I believe that I had formed so many walls around myself. I
Hmm.
had disassociated so grossly from my childhood trauma
Hmm.
that I needed something that powerful to dissolve all of that for me to see. I mean, it was one of the most brutal experiences I've ever gone through in my life. I mean, Iboga is not for the faint of heart. As we know, it's one of the most powerful hallucinogens. The psychedelic trip, as you might say, lasted 18 to 24 hours. The day
Mm-hmm.
after was one of the hardest days of my life. Just, you deplete a lot of serotonin,
Mm-hmm.
um, and dopamine. And it also was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. And when I went through that initial experience, it was the day I was coming out the birthing canal, and it was an invitation to revisit my entire life up until present day and all the negative programming that um, I had adopted by way of my childhood trauma. And then I also had to live through every incident of abuse from my childhood, which when you're seeing it for the first time, it's so overwhelming. For me, it was so overwhelming to the psyche to try to integrate that experience, because at that point I had a happy, healthy
Mm-hmm.
um, relationship with my family. And so to go back and revisit all of it was really confusing to integrate that, and took me a lot of years to really find my footing in understanding that.
So are you in a relationship with your family at this moment, or are you still in working progress?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I do have a relationship with all of my family. I think after my sister Jacqueline died,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we could no longer collectively, or in my opinion, we could no longer collectively hide the amount of childhood trauma that we had.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now we were losing family members.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's been a really interesting process to witness my family go through. The ones that are still in denial, the ones that want to heal but don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my sister Jacqueline, before she passed, she had asked, I just don't know what it means to do the work. I want to do the work, but I don't even know how to start. And I think I had taken 9 of my family members. They joined me on one of my ayahuasca retreats, including my 80-year-old Mormon mother. And it was such a powerful experience for all of us to be together. And my sister Jacqueline was there, and then she took her life shortly thereafter. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, I do believe that we all are here on our own spiritual curriculums. And I think that, you know, having access to these indigenous medicines, I think there's a misconception too that you can just drop in and have this experience and everything is magically healed.
Mm-hmm.
Psychedelics are 20%, and then 80% is the integration afterwards and what we choose to do with what's been revealed to us and the downloads, as they might say.
Right.
And it's not a fix all, and definitely it still takes a lot of work. I still am using psychedelics today as a healing tool.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I would just like to caution that it's not a one stop
Yeah.
cure for trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people need to kind of decide of, which direction they want to go. Like for me, I haven't tried it. I've been curious about it. I've been reading quite a bit about ayahuasca as well myself.
Hmm.
So next time I'm down in Costa Rica, or maybe fly down to Peru, I
Yeah.
definitely would be interested in trying it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
ayahuasca and I have such a beautiful relationship with that medicine. It's such a devout teacher for me.
Hmm.
It's just something, and I think other people would absolutely say the opposite about ayahuasca. I have friends that have tried it and they're like, not my medicine. And I think that's something that, we all have our unique medicine too. I mean, it can be music to books to
Yeah, I was just going to say too, it's like, what's your calling? Because you need to have that calling for it,
yeah,
right? If you
yeah,
don't have that, then just don't go that path. So the question for me would be, how do you integrate psychedelic in your practice with your clients or with the people that you work with?
yeah. So there's a lot of psychedelic medicines that I work with,
Hmm.
and I do coaching a lot with
Hmm.
clients with the use of psychedelics and without.
Okay.
Not everyone is called, and oftentimes they need to tease their way into it. So I do a lot of trauma work with my clients, utilizing a lot of different modalities that I've learned over the years. And then
Hmm.
I also integrate, when they feel ready, the use of psychedelics. I think they are undoubtedly such a powerful tool if you're called to it. And I think a lot of times, the psyche is so powerful that it can block us from really getting down to the root of some of these childhood memories.
Hmm.
I love the example of psychedelics are, let's imagine you're with your mother and you're in the desert in the summer heat. It's 115 degrees out, and you're walking down the street and you walk past an ice cream parlor and you're like, Mommy, Mommy, let's go in. So you go in, you both get an ice cream, you come back out, and the summer heat is so hot that the ice cream starts melting all over your hand, and your mom grabs it and she licks around it really fast. You go into hysterics because she's taken your ice cream, right? And all of a sudden, you create this narrative around your life of, I'm unlovable, I don't get what I want, whatever it is, of those negative, patterns that you adopt. And I have found more often than not, people will go back into these psychedelic experiences and they'll revisit these nuanced experiences that they've had, thinking that they're no big deal, but they've adopted eating disorders for years because of it. They have depression, anxiety, what have you. And so, one thing that talk therapy doesn't often provide in an hour and a half of a session is the ability to have enough trust and time to go back to these repressed memories that
Hmm.
are holding on to these toxic behaviors that we're acting out now in our adult life. And so, one of the things that I do with my clients is, once we can go back and we can access that and we can extract that, I find that psychedelics can kind of act like psychic surgery. Like, let's go in and find those pieces that
Hmm.
still have attachment to these negative, maladaptive coping strategies that we have in our adult life: addiction,
Yeah.
porn, drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, whatever your eating disorders. So we can go back and heal the root cause. And when you have a lot of those, little t traumas that add up, it's
Hmm.
hard to actually access those outside of, years of meditation or psychedelic medicines.
Mm. I love the quote of Gabor Mate, which is why the addiction, but why the pain? So
Yeah,
we're so addicted to, you know what I mean? But it's
I
always
think
that
that,
pain from whatever it is.
yeah, I know the quote that you're speaking of, and I think
Mhm.
it's not asking why the addiction, but why the pain, And
Yeah.
so oftentimes he says, we should celebrate our addictions because they're keeping us alive, they're keeping
Hmm.
us safe. And it's interesting, before my sister Jacqueline committed suicide, she got sober 8 months prior.
Hmm.
And in this sobriety, she had struggled a lot with alcoholism over
Hmm.
the course of her life. And in sobriety, she did not know how to cope with her childhood memories.
Hmm.
She didn't know how to cope with her depression and anxiety.
It
She
was
didn't
too
have
much.
the tools. It was too much. And in the end, she
Hmm.
ended up taking her life. And so I love that you bring that quote up because, in that experience, I've reflected a lot of, if she still had alcohol as a medicine to cope with
Hmm.
those haunting memories while she got help, would she still be alive today? Right.
Hmm.
And, to his point, oftentimes our addictions need to be celebrated. And I'm not in any way, stretch, or form saying we should stay addicted.
No, of
but
course.
it
Yeah.
is, it's a coping strategy,
Right.
to really numb out the pain of our childhoods.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't want to bring that up. We don't want to bring up the bad memories that we've had, and maybe sometimes we just don't even know that we have these painful memories.
Hmm.
Um, so we tend to mask them with, like you said, alcohol, drugs, whatever else it is, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, to something that I just want to highlight, I don't think that psychedelics are for everyone. I
Hmm.
think you have to be ready to do the work. I was fortunate enough that when I went through my first psychedelic experience, I was in school studying spiritual psychology. I had done a tremendous amount of work on myself prior to that. I had attended retreats around the world, non-medicinal with psychedelics, but I had done a 2-year shamanic study at that point. I
Hmm.
had a lot of tools in the toolkit. So when all my memories came back, I had a lot of things that I could tether to. And the other part of it was I made a vested interest to curate a profound and powerful community around me.
Hmm.
And I went to great lengths to join support groups and, curate friends in the space that could really support me. And I
Hmm.
think it's also something that we heal in community. And I think, one of the things that my sister said before her suicide was, I feel so alone. I feel like I don't
Hmm.
have community. I don't have that connection. And when we lose that connection, not only to others, but to ourselves,
Hmm.
the fear of that, I think, often drives people to
Yeah.
suicide, to ending their lives.
Yeah, I had recently had a conversation with someone about community as well. Is just we were talking about bringing up children
Mm,
and the stress that we women, we were just talking about women in general, but even as a family, you carry so much because we don't have these family, these communities anymore like we used to have in those tribes. So as a mother, for example, you have to do like our society has been, I don't want to say brainwash us, but has put us in a situation where we have to be mothers. We have to look good for our husbands. We have to work. We have to earn money, obviously, when we work. There's so much pressure where we don't have these communities when we get help.
yeah.
Everything is so isolated.
Yeah.
So I
And I,
also really appreciate you saying that because I am a huge believer in creating these communities when people can come together and help each other in whatever it is.
yeah. And I think too, the other collective trauma that we all have was COVID. It was the
Yes.
massive disruptor, right? That sent us all kind of to our corners without community. And I've found, I live in Park City, Utah, I've
Mm-hmm.
found in my community here that, the groups that I used to commune in really got splintered
Mm-hmm.
as everyone was separated for so long, and really rebuilding new community has been fascinating. And I think, what do you do? I often reflect with my sister. She was a single mom. She didn't have a lot of means
Mm-hmm.
to pursue alternative healing modalities. And how do we remedy some of that for those that don't have access as readily as we
Yeah.
do to different communities? And it's something that I feel passionate about building,
Mm-hmm.
especially around abuse and giving resources and being able to come, we have it with AA or, different programs such as that. But what do we have by way of group settings in that regard for those that have experienced childhood trauma, where they can
Mm-hmm.
come and find community and likeness
And
and
feel safe. Mm-hmm.
feel safe? Absolutely. And it's such an important part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that healing can also be so isolating because just as you were sharing about your personal story and the apprehension, I mean, for years, I played the persona of perfectionism. I
Mm-hmm.
had a perfect childhood. Everything was wonderful. I'm successful. I'm
Mm-hmm.
this. And then when my memories started coming back, I was terrified to tell anyone that I had been abused. I carried so much shame. I mean, my own friends didn't even know that I had had a child,
Right.
and I just thought, I'm going to be ostracized. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
shamed.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's interesting is that when we share and we show up authentically,
Mm-hmm.
as Brene Brown says, we give others permission to do the same. And I have found such profound healing and community when I started speaking about my journey and healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People can relate.
Mhm.
And because we, like I said earlier, shove everything under the carpet, we don't want to share our stories. We're afraid of the judgment and of the unfairness,
Yeah.
in our communities or some of the communities.
Mhm.
So, sharing these stories, I think it's important because people will relate absolutely. And then they're like, well, I feel safe. And
Yeah,
when you feel safe, you feel the love and then you open up.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's so well said. And I think that, you know, those that have experienced extreme childhood trauma, they don't
Mm.
know how to be safe. They don't know how to feel safe within themselves.
Right.
I've recently been studying a lot about attachment theory. It's kind of a hot topic right
Yeah.
now, and understanding how we attach in love and relationships and how that shows up for us.
Right.
And, so much of it is how do we feel safe within ourselves? And then how do we trust to do the same in relationship and partnership with those we
Right.
love, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one for a lot of people as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially for women.
Oh, especially for women. I was reading something this morning about women have the highest rate of autoimmune
Hmm.
disorders, and also, breast cancer, they're now studying, is linked to repressed emotion because women oftentimes are so selfless that they'll put everyone before themselves and bottle all this in, and it's manifesting in disease, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think it's so important that we talk about how we take care of ourselves. Self care is self love. And I often get asked the question by my clients, I don't even know what self love
Mhm.
means. Like, what does that mean? How do I do that? And I think there's a misconception that it's these big grand gestures, and it's the little choices that we make every single day to choose in favor of ourselves, to fill our bucket first before we fill others. And I
Mhm.
think it's just, it's the little things. Like for me, I love roses. I often have roses
Mhm.
around that bring me joy. I mean, it's not a big trip or something like that. It's the little nuanced things that we do for ourselves to ensure that we're really feeding our soul.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm with you too. Running even a bath with
Hmm.
a little bit of essential oil, or I personally love being in the garden.
Hmm.
That's my meditation. That's
Yeah.
my connecting with nature, grounding, and everything. I love it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I live up north when it's minus 24 Fahrenheit, super
Oh,
cold,
wow.
6 months of the year. So, even going outside on a cold day, touching a tree, being in nature, I just it's our routine where after dinner what we do would take our dogs and we'll just go for a walk. Doesn't matter what it is. We don't do it every day, but we'll
Hmm.
try to be very conscious and very like, okay, we need to make this as a routine and let's just pack up and go.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Thank
It's
you.
just so important. I mean, nature is my church. I love
Yes.
walking on these trails in Park City, and being in the forest has taken more of my troubles and stress and anxiety than I can count. It
Mm.
truly is just so medicinal to my soul.
It's like
I have a,
changing your energy levels.
yeah, I have a question
Recharging.
for you.
Yeah.
What do you feel is your soul's purpose and calling? Have you discovered that yet?
Yeah. You know what? That too also took me a while. So when I went through my spiritual discovery and trying to figure out what I was here for, um, I discovered that my help with people is I'm a nutritionist, so I love helping people get well.
Hmm.
I love helping people find its way to health. How do they go from point A to point B? Teaching them that food is medicine. Really, truly finding that food is what you eat,
Mm-hmm.
kind of is what you are, who you are, right? So, and then this podcast became more of a epiphany for me because I used to be very nervous speaking. I would refuse to speak in front of camera
Mm-hmm.
or in front of big crowds and things like that. And being a holistic nutrition and speaking actually, I was like, I need to do this, and it took me about 2 years. And finally, a friend of mine, Jason Petrunik, who runs actually a podcast here from our town, I met up with him and he said to me, Alex, just go and do it. If
Hmm.
you screw up, you screw up. It's okay. Just go
Yeah.
and do it.
Hmm.
So I go back as I started a year ago and I went through some of my old episodes and I was like, I look so robotic. I'm like, what the heck? But at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere, right? So it takes time, it takes courage, it takes, um, just you got to go out there. So I said to myself, I have to go out there.
Hmm.
And I love these kind of conversations because I am learning as well a lot about myself going and doing these interviews, right? So, but yeah, I think for me, going back to your question, is to really help people um, with eating
Hmm.
and their health. Yeah.
I love I love food as medicine and that notion because we're at this point
Mm.
where a lot of biohackers are coming on the scene and we're seeing a lot of, I mean, if you scroll through social media, every
Yeah.
other post is an ad for another supplement, another
Yeah.
modality. And, I kind of fell victim, so to speak. I don't like using the word victim
Mhm.
to being sold on, oh, this will up level your life, and ended up with a traumatic brain injury by some of these biohacking
Right.
modalities that are out there. And I have never felt more confident that our bodies have the innate wisdom to heal themselves. And I've
Right.
really had to drop into that as I've healed through this experience for the last 2 years
Mhm.
of my body has the wisdom to come back into balance.
Mhm.
And if I can be in concert with that and listening and be aware, healing is possible through, the things that are readily available to
Mhm.
us, you know? And so,
No, I agree. I agree. And I find it for me, the biohacking, I used to call myself a biohacking queen. And I recently have changed that because I've asked myself, I'm like, why am I calling myself biohacking queen? I'm like, it's not, I don't sell any product. I don't sell any vitamins. I actually am not I mean, I'm not against vitamins and minerals and things like that because sometimes we do need them because our soil is being so depleted from things. But at the end of the day, especially working with women, I said to myself, I am more of a biological living
mm,
where because we are so different, like our biochemistry is so different, and we are so unique in so many different ways that
Mm-hmm.
certain things work differently for you, for example, than they work for me. So we have to find the way of what works for one particular individual,
Mm-hmm. I
right?
could not agree more. I mean, that's one thing too that I'm seeing in this space. I don't know anything that's a one size fits all, aside from maybe nutrition. We all need nutrition, and even in nutrition, it needs to be customized, right?
Mhm.
To what, and it's interesting with all the fads of dieting and things like that. I have a dear girlfriend who's in the fitness space, and I asked her the other day, so what do you think about keto and intermittent fasting and blah, blah, blah?
Mhm.
And she just said, you know what? I'm into intuitive eating. I
Mhm.
listen to my body. And when I'm craving something, I know that my body's deficient there, and it just made so much sense for me around that as
Yeah.
well, so long as it's within a nutritional spectrum. And it's not to say that those other modalities don't have a place. Undoubtedly, they do. And I think that everyone responds so dramatically different to how our mind and body is fed.
Mhm. Mhm. And I agree with her. I
Hmm.
find it that again, we women are looking for these quick fixes,
Hmm.
and they might work, but at the same time, they won't work for a very long time.
Yeah.
Especially because we women have so many different kinds of hormones that are
Hmm.
happening in our bodies. So, as keto is great for maybe a menopausal woman, it might not be great for a 25 year old,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
So my question to you is, you have been featured in the Netflix documentary called The River Runner.
Hmm.
And you did help your former partner. I believe he was the world renowned kayaker, Scott. I can't remember his last name now. I'm sorry.
Scotland.
Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, overcome his childhood traumas. How did you help him overcome these obstacles?
Yeah. Scott is such a dear friend, and I believe we came together for such a divinely profound soul contract, as I might say.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to hold such sacred space for me as I was unpacking a lot of my childhood memories. And in return, when he was diagnosed with a brain tumor and then had his brain tumor removed through a very extensive and long surgery, um, there were behaviors in him that I witnessed that he really hadn't dealt with. And if we look at things are happening for us or through us, and if we all have a spiritual curriculum that we're here to live out, for me, I invited him to explore why potentially this brain tumor had showed up for him and
Mm-hmm.
what emotional aspects could be tied to that from his childhood. And he ended up, through my encouragement, attending the Hoffman process, which was wonderful
Mm-hmm.
and really allowed him to look at his negative love patterns because of childhood programming. And he went on this deep dive and this soul um, journey of uncovering that and really healing. And then later, he found his way to plant medicines as well in ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
And he is one of the few that is completely reversed and kind of stopped tumor growth at this
Oh,
time. And so
wow.
it's just a testament to mindset, diet, healing our childhoods, getting all of the toxic energy out of our body so we can be in balance in all ways.
Mm. Yeah, it's something that we really get stuck.
Yeah.
It's like really, I think that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
It's really looking into that 5, 6, 7, 10-year-old child
Hmm.
and be like, okay, what's going on there?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I think disease in general, it's an
Hmm.
invitation to healing, to self
Hmm.
inquiry, to going inward and really understanding ourselves better if we'll allow it to be a teacher for us. And I think everything that we go through in life, it can become such a precious gift if
Hmm.
we choose to dance with it in that way.
Hmm.
And so I'm so fortunate that he did take that healing path and, is living his best life. And I think he'll tell you it was one of the most profound teachers for him in learning that vulnerability was strength. I remember when we were together, I would share things vulnerably, and he would be like, "Why are you doing that? What are you doing right now? Are you looking for attention?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just sharing from and he was so uncomfortable around it.
Yeah.
And now he's doing public speaking around,
Yeah.
vulnerability is strength. And the more vulnerable we can be, the deeper we can connect to others. So it's been fun to watch him on his healing journey as well.
Oh, that's amazing. It's like one point I find too is that we tend to carry so much emotional and mental blockages.
Hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Again, I think, what is it, up to age 7 that we being programmed, and then after the 7 year of our life, we're so programmed that it's really hard for us to kind of make that difference.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast this morning, Mel Robbins, and she was
Yes.
talking with someone about attachment styles. And she was saying, her name escapes me who she was interviewing, but she
Hmm.
said that our attachment styles are formed between 0 and 2 years old. So when
Okay.
you think about that, how we're relating in love relationships is between this small window and stored in the subconscious. I mean, it's profound at how we hold on to these experiences. And also,
Hmm.
it's such a call to action for parents and
Hmm.
how we show up for children and our children and other children, and really teaching them how to self regulate, being
Right.
aware, being present for conversations, inviting. I mean, how many times has a child broke out into a temper tantrum and the parent is trying to shush and stop the experience out of
Hmm.
embarrassment rather than allowing to tap into what's happening with the child, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Because they have no emotional regulations. They don't know how to control their emotions, right? So they
exactly.
lash out in their way. And I know, because I can make a, you know, a relation to this, because I have 3 children,
Yeah.
and I can say that raising my first child, my second, my third was completely different, because
Yeah.
I've learned through the process, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes like I did with my first one.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the baby of 9. There was a tremendous amount of physical abuse in our home. And I look at it
Mhm.
now, it's like 9 children and the chaos, and 2 parents that didn't know how to regulate their own emotions or have enough
Mhm.
self awareness. They really, I can see from their own upbringings how hard it was for them to show up in that way. I'm so grateful that in today's day and age, we have a language around it that's becoming common in how
Mhm.
to heal trauma.
Mm. Yeah, we all carry it. It's
Yeah.
just what we do next is, and I think people like yourself is absolutely wonderful, because um, we need people like you. All I
Mhm.
will say, because we are all engraved in this traumatic event that we carried, and having that help is absolutely important in moving on in life. I always say to my clients too, is it's a journey. What
Mhm.
you've been eating in the last 50 years, for example, you have created this. So, because a lot of people want a quick fix. And I
Mhm.
say to them, it takes a
Mhm.
long time for you to come to that equilibrium. You have to work on this, and you have to come to that point where it's not going to take you a week, for example, lose weight. A quick loss of weight, yes,
Mhm.
go on kind of, keto diet, I'll take your money, fine, done.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way. I absolutely don't work that way.
Yeah.
It's a process. It
Yeah.
takes a while. It might take you 3 months. It might take you 6 months. It might take you a year or more.
Mhm.
That's how you look at life. It's a
I
journey.
Yeah.
It's a
I
journey of healing. And we all have our moments where we could fall again.
mm,
But you got to pick yourself up and start all over.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I've been gifted with such a superpower of resilience. I've
Mm-hmm.
rebuilt myself more times than I can count. And, it's just something that we have a choice. We can
Right.
show up and absolutely not be a victim to the life that's been delivered
Mm-hmm.
to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I have a lot of opportunities where I could have taken such a drastic, different
Turn.
path.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've
Mm-hmm.
lost two sisters. That could have easily been me. And there was something inside of me that knew wholeheartedly that there was something greater out there. And I am just so grateful to be on this path of healing and to be able to have conversations with people like you that are also out there spreading their passion and joy into the world and supporting others and really living their best lives, right? And there isn't an easy answer. I often
Mm-hmm.
say, don't let anyone be your guru, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because the
Absolutely.
wisdom, the divine wisdom and God is in each and every one of us.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast the other day too, and it was exactly what you just said. Is God is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's how
Yeah.
you see it. So,
Absolutely.
so how do you see a relationship between spiritual and mental health evolving in our today's society, for example?
Whew, it's a big conversation. This week has been Sundance Film Festival in Park City,
Mm-hmm.
and it's offered a lot of beautiful films and storytelling, in addition to lots of panels and being able to talk about what's going on collectively in the world. And, now we are in such interesting times. And the only thing
Mm-hmm.
that I can really anchor to is that we are at this time of this mass collective consciousness and we can no longer be asleep anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, the intersection of psychology, mental health, and spirituality, I don't believe that these can be, kind of mutually exclusive. I believe that we can't treat the mind without the body and the spirit. It's all connected. And I know for me, I cannot deny that there isn't a greater force and orchestration at play. And
Mm-hmm.
I really tap into that collective consciousness and that we all are here for a divine purpose. I think that if you're on a journey or exploring, looking at your mental health, I strongly encourage everyone to look at the mind, body, and spirit and the intersection of all of those. And so I think that, meditation,
Mm-hmm.
prayer, self awareness, doing the work, being in right relationship with ourselves, being in community and integrity, it's all so important. And then also too, I think, I did a post recently, we're only as sick as our secrets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until we bring our trauma into the light and we allow it to be seen by others and for ourselves, and to not hold on to it, to transmute it. I mean, it's really about not staying in the trauma story, but living a life of freedom and joy. And that's where that's the path I want to go with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have to go back somewhat and look at what happened and what's driving these behaviors, but then we want to move out of it so we can find a path of healing,
Mm-hmm.
and really freedom. Right. And it also has to do with the work that you're doing. We
Mm-hmm.
can't do that with a vessel that's clogged down with pollutants.
Mm-hmm.
We have to feed our body so that we can be closer to the divine source, whatever that means for you, and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
word and term you use to identify that of a higher power.
Yeah, and I think you said it very beautifully. It's all connected. We
Hmm.
can't just looking at one thing.
Hmm.
It's the mind, body, and soul. It's
Yeah.
everything,
Hmm.
right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Would there be any books or resources that you like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I love that you bring that up. I mean, one of my favorites around sexual abuse is The Courage to Heal. I recommend that to a lot of my clients that have been going through that. The Body Keeps the Score is another profound bedside read. And I
Mm-hmm.
think pretty much anything by Gabor Mate, he's so brilliant when it comes to trauma, addiction, ADHD, etc. Those are kind of my go-to Bibles with my clients. I mean, for fun, I always love the Surrender Experiment. That's another wonderful teacher. And so, yeah, thank you so much for the
Mm-hmm.
invitation to share and be in this beautiful space with you.
Thank you so much. So, my last question will bring me to what message would you like to share with others?
Mm. I believe, regardless of circumstance, regardless of where you grew up, the house you grew up, the part of the world that you've lived in, and the journey that you've been on, healing is possible. And having lost two sisters, I wish that I could go back in time. And I know that if we choose to walk this path, that healing is absolutely possible, and to not give up.
Not give up. That's the word.
Mhm.
Just keep on searching, keep on looking.
Yeah.
And again, I appreciate that. I will definitely post all the information on the
Mhm.
bottom of the notes so people can find out a little bit more about you and everything. Any other final thoughts that you would have?
No, I think it's,
Mm-hmm.
even with trauma, we can live a magical life, and I have every excuse to not live my best life by way of trauma that I've lived through. And yet we can move through it, and we can live, I live in such a beautiful, divine, um, magical orchestration. It doesn't mean that there's days where it's like, what am I doing? I just finished writing my memoir. I'm working on a 3-part docu-series and really uncovering a lot of abuse that's happening within the Mormon church that's being
Mm-hmm.
concealed. And there's days where I want to give up. And I think if we can surrender and get out of our own way and really listen to what our divine calling is, I believe that each and every one of us has something. And so I just leave you with that invitation that your best life is waiting for you if you choose to allow it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for sharing all of this. I think it's very important to tap into our own selves and really heal this planet, heal ourselves, heal our children. Like I was listening to again, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, but someone said that it takes 7 years from the past generation, and it will take 7 years forward to heal, to
Wow.
have these children fully healed. So we're hoping, I mean, I don't think we'll be able to see this in this uh, lifetime, but I hope that we'll come to that point
Yeah.
one day that our children or their children's will
Yeah.
be in a completely different state where we're at right now. And I
Yeah.
hope that this is where we're going. So,
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for
okay.
your time and energy.
Thank you so much.